On the evening of February 18, 2001, a man walked alone through a quiet park in Northern Virginia. He moved slowly and deliberately, without hesitation. This was not a nervous walk, but one that felt practiced, measured, and familiar. For more than 20 years, he had walked like this before. The park was ordinary, with a footbridge, bare trees, and cold winter air. Nothing about the place suggested that one of the longest intelligence penetrations in American history was about to end there. The man carried a small package. Inside it were classified documents, information that should never have left secure government systems. He placed the package beneath the bridge, marked the location using a prearranged signal, and turned back toward his car. He did not run, he did not rush, and he did not look around. He believed he was invisible. What he did not know was that more than 100 federal agents were already watching him. They were positioned throughout the park, hidden behind trees, inside vehicles, on elevated ground. Cameras had been installed, movements tracked, timelines mapped. This time, the walk would not end the way it always had before. As he reached the parking area, agents emerged from concealment, weapons drawn, voices raised, commands issued. The man was ordered to his knees, handcuffed, arrested. His name was Robert Hansen. He was 56 years old, and he was not an outsider who had broken into the intelligence system. He was part of it. For more than 2 decades, Hansen had worked inside the organization responsible for catching spies. He specialized in counterintelligence. He helped design and understand the very methods used to detect foreign agents and internal threats. And for more than 20 years, he had used that knowledge to avoid detection. This was not a case of incompetence. It was not a single missed warning sign. It was not the failure of one supervisor or one department. It was something far more uncomfortable. The system knew there was a traitor. It knew secrets were being lost. It knew sources were being compromised. And still it failed to stop him. That is the question at the center of this story. Not who Robert Hansen was, not even what he did, but how someone like him could operate, quietly and methodically, inside the heart of American counterintelligence, for more than 20 years, without being caught.
Because the clues were there. By the late 1980s, intelligence operations had begun to collapse. Sources who should have been protected were exposed. Foreign intelligence services demonstrated knowledge they should not have had. Years of work vanished without explanation. Investigators understood what this meant. There was a mole, an insider with long-term access, someone patient, someone disciplined, someone who understood the system well enough to defeat it. The search began. Files were reviewed, access logs examined, financial records scrutinized, interviews conducted. Hundreds of employees fell under suspicion at one time or another. Robert Hansen was one of them. More than once. And more than once, he was dismissed. Not because he was cleared beyond doubt, but because he did not fit expectations. He lived modestly. He drove an aging car. He did not display sudden wealth. He did not travel unnecessarily. He did not change his behavior. There was nothing obvious to explain how a government employee on a standard salary could have been secretly receiving large sums of money. In an environment trained to detect anomalies, Hansen was invisible, precisely because he refused to become one. This is where the story often becomes simplified. The narrative usually focuses on betrayal, on treason, on the idea that evil hides behind ordinary faces. But that explanation is too easy, because it avoids a more disturbing reality. Hansen was not reckless or impulsive. He was not driven by ideology or rage. He was controlled. And that control extended to every aspect of his life. He compartmentalized. He separated his actions from their consequences. He lived in parallel worlds that never collided. Until they did. To understand how this happened, it is not enough to follow the timeline of his espionage. You have to understand the kind of person who could do this at all. A person capable of patience without boredom, secrecy without stress, deception without visible guilt. A person who could attend religious services on Sunday, go to work in counterintelligence on Monday, and deliver classified material to a foreign intelligence service without apparent internal conflict. That kind of individual does not emerge by accident, and neither does a system that fails to stop him for 2 decades. The arrest in that Virginia park did not represent a sudden victory. It represented the end of a long delay, because by the time the handcuffs closed, the damage was already done. Operations had been compromised. Lives had been destroyed. Trust had been broken in ways that could never be fully repaired. The arrest was dramatic, but it was also late. And the most unsettling part of this story is not that Hansen succeeded. It is that for years, the system came close to catching him, and then looked away. Again and again. There were moments when the investigation drifted near him. Moments when the evidence narrowed. Moments when his access, his background, and his behavior should have raised alarms. But each time something intervened. Another suspect, another explanation, another assumption that the threat must lie elsewhere. The idea that the mole could be someone so embedded, so unremarkable, so disciplined, was difficult to accept. Institutions, like people, develop blind spots. They focus on what they expect to see. They trust what feels familiar. They hesitate to imagine that the threat could come from within their most trusted ranks. Hansen understood that. He did not exploit a single weakness. He exploited a mindset. A belief that loyalty looks a certain way. That danger announces itself. That betrayal leaves fingerprints. For more than 20 years, he proved that none of those assumptions were necessarily true. And when he was finally arrested, his response was not panic. It was resignation. According to accounts from agents present, Hansen did not resist. He did not protest. He did not ask why. He reportedly said only one thing. "What took you so long?" That question was not arrogance. It was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement that he had always known this could end only one way. And that the remarkable part was not the arrest itself. It was how long it took to happen.
In the parts that follow, we will trace how Robert Hansen became the kind of person capable of this kind of betrayal. How he learned the inner workings of the system designed to stop people like him, and how a combination of personal psychology and institutional failure allowed one man to remain hidden in plain sight for more than 2 decades. Because this is not just the story of a spy, it is the story of how systems fail, not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, over time, while everyone assumes someone else is watching. Long before Robert Hansen understood intelligence systems, surveillance protocols, or dead drops, he learned something far more fundamental. He learned how to be alone. Robert Philip Hansen was born in Chicago in April 1944. He was an only child, raised in a household defined less by warmth than by discipline. His father, Howard Hansen, was a police officer, rigid, demanding, and emotionally distant. Praise was rare, approval was conditional, and affection was not freely given. By most accounts, Robert never felt he measured up. This was not a household that encouraged emotional expression. It rewarded control. It punished weakness. Silence was safer than explanation. For a child, these conditions shape behavior quietly, over time. Robert learned to observe rather than participate, to internalize frustration rather than express it, to function without external validation. Teachers later described him as intelligent but withdrawn, capable of deep concentration, socially awkward, uninterested in fitting in. He excelled academically, but he did not form close friendships. He did not seek attention. He did not crave approval from peers. He existed comfortably on the margins. This kind of isolation is often misunderstood, especially when it is mistaken for weakness rather than adaptation. It is easy to assume that people who keep to themselves are lonely. In reality, some people become highly adapted to solitude. They find clarity in it, stability, control. Hansen was one of those people. He attended Catholic schools and performed well. He followed rules. He met expectations where they were clearly defined. But emotionally, he remained detached.
He did not rebel. He did not act out. He did not draw attention. He simply learned to live inside his own head. After high school, Hansen enrolled at Knox College, majoring in chemistry. Again, the pattern repeated: strong academic performance, minimal social engagement, no interest in campus life. He spent long hours studying alone, reading, thinking. People who knew him at the time described him as polite, reserved, and difficult to know. He was not charming, he was not charismatic, but he was disciplined. That discipline would become central to everything that followed. After graduating, Hansen briefly entered dental school. He left after a year. The reason he later gave was simple: the work bored him. This detail matters. Hansen did not abandon dentistry because it was difficult. He abandoned it because it did not challenge him mentally. He was not motivated by hands-on work. He was motivated by complexity. He later pursued an MBA, focusing on accounting and information systems, fields that reward precision, logic, and control. Around this time, he met Bonnie Wausick. Bonnie came from a large, devout Catholic family. Warm, close-knit, emotionally expressive in ways Hansen was not. To those around them, the pairing seemed unlikely. But it worked. Bonnie provided structure and social grounding. Hansen provided stability and order. They married in 1968. To the outside world, this looked like the beginning of a conventional life: a stable marriage, a professional career, a growing family. But internally, Hansen remained unchanged. He did not suddenly become emotionally open. He did not become socially expansive. He remained controlled, private, internally oriented.
After working briefly as an accountant, Hansen joined the Chicago Police Department, assigned to Internal Affairs. This role suited him. Internal Affairs is not about public interaction. It is about observation, documentation, quiet investigation. It requires the ability to work without trust, to assume deception, to remain detached from those being scrutinized. Hansen excelled. Colleagues noted his attention to detail and his willingness to operate independently. He was not popular, but he was competent. In 1976, he applied to the FBI. Again, the pattern held. He passed background checks, he completed training, he followed procedures. He did not stand out. That, too, mattered. The FBI does not only seek intelligence, it seeks reliability. Hansen appeared reliable. He did not drink excessively, he did not socialize heavily, he did not gamble, he did not display emotional volatility. He lived quietly. He worked methodically. In the late 1970s, he was assigned to units dealing with organized crime and later Soviet intelligence analysis. This is where something subtle but significant occurred. Hansen found himself surrounded by complexity: surveillance systems, counterintelligence methodologies, information flows. This was not physical danger, it was intellectual terrain, and he understood it instinctively. He learned how investigations were structured, how suspicions were prioritized, how resources were allocated. He learned what triggered alarms and what did not. He learned that most systems rely on patterns, and that those patterns can be avoided. Importantly, he learned something else: that trust inside institutions is often assumed rather than proven. Hansen did not immediately betray anyone. At this stage, there is no evidence of ideological conflict, no expressed hostility, no radical beliefs. What existed was something quieter: a sense of intellectual superiority, a belief that he understood the system more deeply than those around him, and a personality uniquely suited to exploitation. Hansen was not impulsive. He did not seek excitement. He did not crave recognition. What he sought was mastery. He enjoyed understanding systems in full, seeing where they failed, recognizing how easily assumptions could be manipulated. This is not the profile of a typical criminal. Most criminals make mistakes because they are driven by urgency, by emotion, by need. Hansen was driven by patience. He could wait. He could plan. He could delay gratification indefinitely. And he could keep secrets without visible strain. Psychologists sometimes describe this trait as extreme compartmentalization, the ability to separate actions from identity, to isolate behavior from moral self-concept. In most people, this capacity is limited. For Hansen, it was unusually strong. He could be a husband, a father, a churchgoer, and a counterintelligence officer, without allowing those roles to interfere with one another. There was no dramatic internal conflict,
no visible crisis of conscience. He did not need to justify himself constantly. He simply separated. This capacity did not make him a spy, but it made him capable of becoming one. When the opportunity eventually presented itself, it would not feel reckless to him. It would feel controlled, managed, intellectually justified, and most importantly, survivable. Because by the time Robert Hanssen reached the late 1970s, he had spent his entire life learning how to live quietly inside systems without drawing attention. He had learned how to obey rules while observing their weaknesses, how to appear unremarkable while thinking several steps ahead, how to exist without being seen.
These are not traits most people cultivate, but for Hanssen, they were simply the way he had always lived. In the next phase of this story, those traits would meet something else: access. And once that happened, silence would no longer be just a personality trait. It would become a weapon. By the late 1970s, Robert Hanssen was no longer simply an observer of institutions. He was inside one of the most complex security organizations in the world, and more importantly, he was in a position to watch how it thought. Hanssen's early assignments were not glamorous. They were analytical, paper-heavy, methodical. But this was exactly where the system revealed itself. Counterintelligence is not about dramatic arrests or sudden revelations. It is about patterns, access logs, behavioral baselines, financial anomalies. Most investigations begin the same way. Something fails. Information appears where it should not be. A source goes silent. An operation collapses. Investigators do not ask who immediately. They ask how. They trace access. They build lists. They narrow pools. Hanssen learned this process from the inside. He saw how suspicions were ranked, how resources were assigned, how attention moved away from cases that did not produce quick results. He learned that most counterintelligence work depends on assumptions, that insiders are generally trustworthy, that betrayal leaves visible signs, that guilt produces pressure. But what Hanssen also learned was this: the system was designed to catch people who behaved like criminals, not people who behaved like disciplined employees. Most moles are detected because they change. They spend too much money. They take unnecessary risks. They seek contact. They enjoy the rewards of betrayal too openly. Hanssen did none of those things. He lived within his means. He avoided unnecessary interactions. He did not talk about his work. He did not seek recognition. From the system's perspective, he was stable. And stability, in large organizations, is often interpreted as safety. Hanssen also learned something more subtle. Investigations have momentum. They begin with urgency, but they require constant reinforcement to continue. If evidence does not accumulate quickly, attention shifts elsewhere. Cases that linger become background noise. Hanssen watched investigations stall. He saw how uncertainty created hesitation, how doubt diluted focus. He understood that the most dangerous person inside a system is not the one who challenges it, but the one who fits perfectly within it. At the same time, Hanssen's access was expanding. He worked in units that tracked Soviet intelligence activities. He reviewed sensitive reports. He saw how information moved between agencies. He understood classification levels. He understood compartmentalization. And crucially, he understood what he could see and what he could not. This allowed him to build a mental map of the system's blind spots. Hanssen did not need to break security protocols. He only needed to operate where oversight was weakest. He learned that counterintelligence resources were finite, and that attention was always prioritized based on perceived threat.
And that perceived threat often came from outside: foreign agents, diplomatic personnel, known adversaries. Internal threats were considered, but they were uncomfortable. Suspecting an insider meant questioning trust. It meant acknowledging vulnerability. It meant the possibility that the system had failed. Organizations resist that idea instinctively. Hanssen understood this resistance. He also understood something else. Most counterintelligence failures are not technical. They are cultural. They emerge from shared beliefs about loyalty, professionalism, and identity. Hanssen looked the part. He followed procedures. He respected hierarchy. He kept his personal life separate. There was no obvious reason to doubt him. As the years passed, Hanssen's understanding deepened. He learned how financial monitoring worked and its limitations. He learned how polygraph examinations were interpreted. He learned how investigators balanced probabilities. He learned that absence of evidence often became evidence of absence, and that unresolved cases slowly faded into the background of daily operations. And he learned how easy it was to disappear inside normality. This knowledge did not immediately turn into action. Hansen did not rush. He did not act impulsively. He waited. During this period, his personal life appeared conventional. He and Bonnie were raising a growing family. They attended church regularly. They lived modestly. There were financial pressures, but nothing extraordinary. From the outside, Hansen looked like many other government employees: overworked, underpaid, responsible. Inside, however, something else was forming. Hansen was not angry at the system. He did not see himself as a victim. What he felt was different. A sense that he understood the system better than those running it, a belief that he could move through it without consequence. This is a dangerous mindset. It does not produce recklessness. It produces calculation. Hansen began to see the system not as an authority, but as an environment, something to navigate, something to exploit quietly. He did not see betrayal as chaos. He saw it as a controlled process.
He understood how investigations began. He understood how they faltered. And he understood how to remain uninteresting. This is where most narratives about espionage become misleading. They emphasize motivation, money, ideology, revenge. But in many cases, the decisive factor is opportunity combined with confidence. Hansen believed he could do this safely, not because he was lucky, but because he believed he had already mastered the rules. By the time he reached his mid-30s, he had accumulated three things that rarely converge in one individual: access, understanding, and patience. Access gave him material. Understanding told him how to move. Patience ensured he would not make mistakes. The system around him did not recognize this convergence. It saw a reliable employee, a quiet analyst, a man who did his job. Hansen saw something else. He saw a system that trusted too much in appearances, that relied on behavioral deviations to detect danger. And he knew that as long as he remained unchanged, he would remain invisible. This is what made his eventual decision possible. Not desperation, not ideology, but confidence. Confidence built over years of observation. Confidence reinforced every time an investigation drifted away from him. Confidence that silence, if maintained long enough, would protect him. In the next phase of this story, that confidence would translate into action. And when it did, it would not look dramatic. It would look careful, quiet, and devastatingly effective. When Robert Hansen decided to act, there was no dramatic turning point, no emotional collapse, no sudden crisis. The decision emerged slowly after years of observation. By 1979, Hansen had accumulated something most people never possess at the same time. He had access to sensitive information, he understood how counterintelligence investigations operated, and he had absolute confidence in his ability to remain unnoticed. This was not a leap into the unknown, it was a calculated step into terrain he believed he already controlled. Hansen did not seek out a handler. He did not attempt to make contact in person. He did not reach out through intermediaries. Instead, he chose the least risky method available.
He wrote a letter. The letter was addressed to the KGB. It was anonymous, direct, unemotional. Inside, Hansen made a simple offer. He stated that he had access to valuable intelligence. He demonstrated that claim by including classified material, and he made one thing clear. He did not want meetings. He did not want personal contact. He did not want to be known. He wanted distance. This choice alone reveals something essential. Most first-time spies seek reassurance. They want to know who they are dealing with. They want validation. They want to feel important. Hansen wanted none of that. He understood that human contact creates risk, that every meeting adds variables, that trust is a liability. By keeping the relationship impersonal, he reduced exposure. The response came. The Soviet intelligence service recognized the value of what they had been offered. They also recognized the unusual discipline of the source. Hansen was not asking for ideology. He was not asking for protection. He was asking for a system, a method to exchange information without contact. The arrangement that followed was simple. Dead drops, prearranged locations, signals left in public places, packages exchanged without witnesses. No meetings, no names, and no unnecessary communication. Hansen insisted on it. This insistence served two purposes. First, it minimized the chance of surveillance detection. Second, it reinforced psychological distance. Hansen did not want to see the people he was betraying his country to, and he did not want to see the people he was betraying his country from. The fewer faces involved, the easier it was to compartmentalize. The material he provided was significant, not because it was flashy, but because it was precise. He supplied documents that revealed internal methods, names of sources, details about surveillance operations. This was not raw data stolen impulsively. It was curated. Hansen selected information that demonstrated his access and value without drawing attention to the loss. He did not dump large volumes of material at once. He released it gradually. This pacing mattered. Large sudden leaks trigger alarms. Incremental losses blend into background noise.
Hansen understood this. He also understood how investigators thought. When something failed, they looked outward. They assumed foreign intelligence services had improved their techniques. They assumed technical surveillance had been compromised. They did not immediately assume betrayal from within. Hansen relied on that assumption. For his services, Hansen was paid, but the money itself was not the point. Unlike other espionage cases, Hansen did not suddenly upgrade his lifestyle. He did not move, he did not buy expensive cars, he did not spend extravagantly. The money was stored, hidden, untouched. This was deliberate, and it was central to how he remained invisible. Financial anomalies are among the most common ways insiders are detected. Hansen removed that vulnerability entirely. By all visible measures, he remained exactly the same person. Same routines, same habits, same unremarkable life. This consistency was his greatest protection. The first phase of his espionage lasted only a short time. After delivering initial materials, Hansen did something unexpected. He stopped. He cut off contact. He ceased providing information. He withdrew. From the outside, this might appear strange. Why take such a risk only to abandon it? The answer lies in Hansen's mindset. This was a test, not of the system's security, but of its reaction. Hansen waited to see what would happen. Would investigations be launched? Would suspicion arise? Would his access change? Nothing happened. No interviews, no questions, no changes in his assignments. Life continued as normal. This silence was confirmation. It told Hansen that the system had absorbed the loss without recognizing its source, that no alarms had been triggered, that he remained invisible. This period of inactivity was not repentance, it was reconnaissance. He was measuring the consequences of his actions by watching for ripples. There were none. That absence mattered more than any payment. It validated everything he believed, that the system relied on visible disruption to detect betrayal, that patience could defeat vigilance, that restraint was safer than greed. When Hansen eventually returned to espionage, he would do so with even greater confidence. But for now, he returned to his ordinary life. A counterintelligence officer, a husband, a father, a churchgoer. Nothing about him had changed. And that was the most dangerous thing of all, because the first betrayal had succeeded. Quietly, cleanly, without consequence. In the next phase of this story, something unexpected would interrupt that silence. Not the FBI, not an investigation,
but conscience. Or at least, the appearance of it. And the pause that followed would give Robert Hansen something even more dangerous than confidence. It would give him time. In late 1980, the first real threat to Robert Hansen did not come from an investigation. It came from inside his own home. Bonnie Hansen discovered something that did not belong. A sum of cash, hidden carefully. Too much to explain. Too deliberate to dismiss. She confronted her husband. There was no immediate denial. No anger. No attempt to redirect the conversation. Hansen admitted the truth. He told Bonnie that he had passed information to a foreign intelligence service. He described it as a mistake, a lapse in judgment, something that would never happen again. This moment is often misunderstood. It is tempting to frame it as guilt finally surfacing, as conscience breaking through discipline. But Hansen's response was not emotional collapse. It was control. He did not panic. He did not attempt to flee. He did not consider turning himself in. Instead, he reframed the situation. He told Bonnie he had stopped, that the risk was over, that the danger had passed. And then he did something that would change the trajectory of the next 5 years. He went to confession. Hansen was a devout Catholic. Faith was a constant in his life. Church attendance was routine. Ritual mattered. He confessed his actions to a priest. This confession was not public. It was not legal. It was sacramental. Within the structure of the Catholic Church, confession offers absolution, but not accountability in the secular sense. The priest reportedly advised Hansen to stop what he was doing, to repent, to make amends. Hansen agreed, and for a time he appeared to follow that advice. He severed contact. He ceased all espionage activity. He returned fully to his professional routine. From the outside, this looked like resolution. From the inside, it was something else.